Welcome to Is It Worth Reading with Frank and Richard. My name is Frank Biaggi, and I'm here with my good friend, Richard Paris. Richard, are you with us today?
I am good, sir, and I'm prepared to commence forward.
Good. Well, that's good. It's always fun to do book critiques with you, Richard. You know, Richard and I started doing these a while back because we just love reading books. And it's even funner when you read the book and then you get to critique it with a good friend like Richard. So it just makes it a lot better. Richard, since I picked this book, is it okay with you if I go ahead and start and give our audience why I picked it and a little bit about the book?
Yes, please do. Please do, Frank.
Okay, I have several reasons that I picked it. And I thought I'm just going to go into the book because I don't want to confuse. But then I thought, out of fairness to you and our audience, I have to give at least one reason why I picked this book. And the book is New Testament Miracles by Kevin McKinney. But the reason that I picked it is because when I took religion at Whitman College, I took 2 semesters of religion. I'm not going to name the instructor, but him and I became very good friends. And he'd been a professor at Whitman for decades and very renowned individual. And I just took a liking to him. He took a liking to me, and we became very close friends. And this, when I took religion, I mean, I expected to study the Bible and the traditional religion that I had learned growing up. Boy, was I surprised, because what we studied, this was the main book. It's called The Age of Reason by Thomas Paine. And Thomas Paine was the guy back in the colonial times that wrote the pamphlet Common Sense. And Common Sense played a crucial role in convincing colonists to take up arms against England. So in all due respect to Thomas Paine, if it wasn't for him, we might not be where we are today. So you have to respect him for that. But he was also friends with George Washington. So later on, he wrote this book, The Age of Reason. Now, what my religion instructor did not tell me or any of the other class is that after he wrote the book, The Age of Reason, it marked the end of Paine's credibility in the United States, where he became largely despised. Now, he didn't share that with us. But in The Age of Reason, and there was other reasons why he became despised, not just because he wrote this, but him and George Washington had a falling out. I'm not going to get into it. But what he says in this book, and this book, incidentally, it's kind of cool because when I was reading the book that we're critiquing today, I went back into my old college box of my religion class, and I started pulling books out to see, because I remembered, what's going on. And I got this book. So this is original from my old college class. And I did make a few new annotations that I'm going to read today. But what Thomas Paine said was, they represent this virtuous and amiable man, Jesus Christ, to be at once both God and man, and also the Son of God, celestially begotten, on purpose to be sacrificed, because they say that Eve in her longing had eaten an apple. Now listen to this. Putting aside everything that might excite laughter by its absurdity, or detestation by its profaneness, it is impossible to conceive a story more derogatory to the Almighty, more inconsistent with his wisdom, more contradictory to his power than this story is. And he's talking about the story of Jesus Christ.
So he's talking about Genesis.
No, he's talking about
he's talking
Jesus.
about Jesus too.
He's talking about Jesus. Well, let's put it this way. On his deathbed, here's what Thomas Paine said on his deathbed. On his deathbed, his doctor asked him if he wished to accept Jesus Christ before passing. Quote, "I have no wish to believe on that subject," Paine replied before taking his final breath. Believe me, it was about Jesus. So it's always kind of rubbed me wrong. And when I left the religion class, I had a different view than I do today, because since then I've done a lot of studying, and I've studied a lot about Christianity, a lot about religion. And this book today, I got it because I really wanted to put it to the test. It's a book of the 37 miracles that Jesus performed in the Gospels, the first 4 books of the New Testament, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John. And they recorded, I witnessed these miracles, supposedly, and they recorded them in these books. So they're in this book, and that's what it's about. And what really attracted me to it is, whoa, they put all these miracles in this book. This ought to be a good one to evaluate and analyze. So that's where I went into it at. And I really wanted to put this thing to the test, because I'm not going to accept anything on the surface. That's just not, Richard, you know me. I check everything out. I check the author. I check everything out. Okay. So here's the book. And then here, Kevin McKinney is the author. I checked him out. He's credible. He has quite a few books out, and he has study courses and what have you. So then I went into the index, and he has all these miracles listed in chronological order, which is really cool. There's 37 of them. What he didn't do is he didn't number them, and he also has the page numbers wrong on it, so it's a little confusing. So if you look at water turned into wine, which is the first one, it's not on page 10. But so what I did is I just numbered the miracles, which he should have done or should do in a future publication. And then I went all the way down to 37. The page numbers are wrong. So then I went into the first one that I thought was the most important, was the feeding of the 5,000. The reason that I thought that was the most important is because it's chronological order number 19, and that's the order that Jesus did them in during his ministry. But it shows at the very beginning of each chapter which book it was recorded in. Well, this was recorded in all 4 of them, and it's the only miracle that he did that's recorded in all 4 Gospels. The rest of them are not. There's not one other miracle recorded in all 4. They're recorded either one or several or what have you. And I think the author of the book felt the same way, because if you look at the cover of the book, it has the 5 barley loaves and the 2 fish. So it's obviously about this feeding of the 5,000. But then I looked at the version, and I saw where because this is actually out of the Bible. So what's nice about it is the miracle it has the Bible scripture reading in it that came right out of the Bible. But I go, well, wait a minute, what version of the Bible did he use? He didn't put it in there. So it's not in the book. So I couldn't find any footnote of what he used. So I had to go back and find it. And it took me 69 versions to get there, but it's the World English Bible. They call it the WEB US version. And it's a good version. It's what eBible uses, but because it starts with a W and I start at the A's, it took me all the way through about 70 clicks to find it. So that's cool. But then because of our very renowned friend here, Thomas Paine, God rest his soul, because he denounced Jesus basically in the New Testament. So I wanted to go in and see the historical reliability of the gospel. So I found this article from Probe Ministries, and I look all these people up. Probe is international ministries, and they're real reputable. They have a 3 out of 4 star charity rating. Anyway, they had an article, and it said the date of the New Testament writings. The Gospels are dated traditionally as follows. Mark is believed to be the first gospel. It was AD 60. Then Matthew and Luke, AD. And AD is after the death of, it's actually after the birth. AD is really after the birth, but whatever. It's 60, 70 AD after Christ's birth, really. And then AD 90 and 100 was John. So then as you go through this, he says, previously I defended the early dating of the Gospels. Despite this early dating, there is a time. That's not what I want to say. Hold on. He said, previously, we showed that the Gospels were written in the 1st century within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses. These eyewitnesses, both friendly and hostile, scrutinized the accounts for accuracy. So the original writings were accurate. Then in addition, there were 5,000 Greek manuscripts of the New Testament. There was also others, which included another over 24,000 ancient texts. With so many ancient texts, significant alterations should be easy to spot. However, those who accuse the New Testament of being corrupted have not produced such evidence. Well, my theology professor was one of them. I wish I would have had this knowledge when I was in his class. The truth, because him and I sat and talked about this stuff. The truth is, the large number of manuscripts confirm the accurate preservation and transmission of the New Testament writings. We do have textual discrepancies. However, the differences are minor and do not affect any major theological doctrine. Most have to do with sentence structure, vocabulary, and grammar. These in no way affect the major doctrine. And then the Greek scholars agree we have a copy very accurate to the original. Westcott and Hort, which I have right here, very reputable. And they say the copy is 98.33 accurate. And then we have A.T. Robinson, and he says, and I looked him up, have a copy of all this stuff. And incidentally, I keep copies in our file. So when we do these book critiques, and if somebody wants to watch this and they want to see the material, we can send the material to them because I keep a hard copy of all the material that I show in these critiques. So I looked him up, and he said 99% accuracy to the original. And then that part that I accidentally went to a minute ago was how reliable was an oral tradition, because previously, he said he defended the early dating of the Gospels because there was a time gap of several years between the ascension of Jesus and the writing of the Gospels, because they weren't in written form. But he goes, the evidence shows that in oral cultures where memory has trained for generations, oral memory can accurately preserve and pass on large amounts of information. Deuteronomy 6:4-9 reveals to us how important oral instruction and memory of divine teaching was stressed in Jewish culture. It's a well-known fact that the rabbis had the Old Testament and much of the oral law committed to memory. The Jews placed a high value on memorizing whatever writing reflected inspired scripture and the wisdom of God. I studied under a Greek professor who had the Gospels memorized word perfect. In a culture where this is practiced, memorization skills were far advanced compared to ours today. So with that said, contrary to my religion professor, because I didn't have all this information back then, I sat in his office and we had these discussions, and it was very accurate. And I'm going to tell you, what we're about to look at in this book were accounts by Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, and it's what they eyewitnessed, it's what they wrote down, and it's, according to these people, up to 99% accurate. So let's look at it. So here's the first miracle that I'm going to get into, just because it's the one that's in all of the Gospels. And what that means is everyone, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, eyewitnessed it, and they all wrote an account of it as being the truth and that it happened. After they go, a great multitude followed him. They followed Jesus because he was healing literally everybody. These 37 miracles were just a few or 39 miracles. There were
37.
37. These were just a showcase of what he did. He did thousands. He went to towns and he healed everybody. And so they all started following him. And so he had one of his disciples said to him, there is a boy here. So he had 5,000 people following him, and they ran out of food. So one of his disciples said to him, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish, which is what's on the front of this book. But what are these among so many? Jesus said, have the people sit down. So now there was much grass in that place. So the men sat down, in number about 5,000. Well, there's 5,000 men. There could have been women and children. And he goes on to say later, there could have been up to 14, 15,000 people. We don't know, but it says there was 5,000 men. Jesus took the loaves, and having given thanks, he distributed to the disciples to those who were sitting down, likewise also the fish, as much as they desired. When they were filled, he said to his disciples, gather up the broken pieces which are left over, that nothing be lost. So they gathered them up, filled 12 baskets with broken pieces from the 5 barley loaves which were left over by those who had eaten. So literally, he took 5 barley loaves, 2 fish, and he fed at least 5,000 people with them. And they wrote it down. They all witnessed it. And they said, this is the truth. This is what he did. Next miracle, and I'm only going to show you 3. There's out of the 37, because we don't have time to go through all of them. Raising Lazarus from the dead. So this was number 33. It was recorded in John only. Now a certain man was sick, Lazarus from Bethany. It was that Mary who Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary who had anointed the Lord with ointment, wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. So she goes, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I'm going so that I may awaken him out of the sleep, because they called for Jesus to come cure him. The disciples therefore said, Lord, if he has fallen asleep, he will recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he spoke of taking rest and sleep. So Jesus said to them plainly, Lazarus is dead. So he knew in advance. I am glad for your sakes that I was not there, so that you may believe. Nevertheless, let's go to him. So then Thomas, therefore, who's called Didymus, said to his fellow disciples, let's go also that we may die with him, because it was dangerous to go there. So when Jesus came, he found that he had been in the tomb 4 days already. So he purposely stayed back for another couple of days, because he wanted to make sure that everybody knew that he was dead. And so then when Jesus therefore saw her weeping, and I'm skipping through it, but the Jews weeping who came with her, that was her sister, his sister, he groaned in the spirit and was troubled and said, where have you laid him? They told him, Lord, come see. Jesus wept. Some of them said, couldn't this man who opened the eyes of him who was blind have also kept this man from dying? Then Jesus said, take away the stone, because they had put a stone in front of where he was. Martha, the sister of him who is dead, said to him, Lord, by this time there is a stench, for he has been dead 4 days. If you can imagine that. Jesus said, didn't I tell you that if you believed, you would see God's glory? So they took away the stone from the place where the dead man was laying. When he said this, he cried with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. He who was dead came out, bound hand and foot with wrappings, and his face was wrapped around with a cloth. So Jesus said to them, free him and let him go. So the second one, I've only got one more I'm going to show you. The second one was, can you imagine that? He's dead in the tomb 4 days. He smells, his flesh is decaying, and he rolls a stone away and he tells them to come out. And they write this down as gospel truth. So now the next one is he cast out demons into a herd of pigs. So this was number 13. And there was, when he come out of the boat, immediately a man with an unclean spirit met him out of the tombs. He lived in the tombs. Nobody could bind him anymore, not even with chains, because he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been torn apart by him. Nobody had the strength to tame him. Always night and day in the tombs and in the mountains, he was crying out, cutting himself with stones. When he saw Jesus afar, he ran, bowed down to him, and crying out with a loud voice, he said, what have I to do with you, Jesus, you son of the Most High God? I adjure you by God, don't torment me. For he said to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. So anyway, he cast out these demons. They said, he goes, my name's Legion, for you're many. He begged him much that he would not send them away out of the country. Now on the mountainside, there's a great herd of pigs. All the demons begged him, saying, send us into the pigs that we may enter into them. At once Jesus gave them permission. The unclean spirits came out, entered into the pigs. The herd of 2,000 pigs rushed down the bank into the sea, and they were drowned in the sea. Those who fed the pigs fled and told it in the city and in the country. And then the guy came back to Jesus and wanted to go away with him. And Jesus says, well, you can't go with me. And he went his own way and began to proclaim how Jesus had done great things for him, and everyone marveled. So basically, the miracles that they showcase in here are so incredible. Raise someone from the dead who's been dead 4 days. He casts demons, not just a demon, 2,000 demons. And he not only just casts demons out and goes, okay, I cast demons out. He sends them into a herd of 2,000 pigs, and the pigs run over into the sea and drowned. These are just, I would call it irrefutable miracles. I just am in awe reading it, but that's my initial take on it. Richard, you read the book. How did you feel about it?
Well, I actually believe that Jesus performed all these miracles. So I'm not the best antagonist to take you on, because I actually believe in the truth of everything he did. I also believe he performed a lot more miracles. I believe he raised Lazarus from the dead. Plus, there's actually another miracle in here where he raises someone else from the dead. He was the Messiah. Yes, he definitely was the Messiah. But so basically, I'm not in disagreement with the theme you wish to espouse today. I do want to get back to Thomas Paine. I don't agree with Thomas Paine, but I understand his point of view. He's saying it makes no sense that the whole story, and it doesn't seem logical or reasonable. Therefore, being a man of reason, he rejects the whole thing. See, if you go by pure logic or scientific thinking, you would have to say you cannot raise someone from the dead. It's scientifically impossible. Yet it did happen. So basically, science has its limits, which it's not too prone to acknowledge. But I don't want to. I don't want to be too critical of Thomas Paine, because he was kind of reflecting the zeitgeist of the day, which was that reason is everything, and that everything has to be logical and has to fit within a linear model. Obviously, Jesus's miracles do not and never will, and I do believe they all did occur. And I also think he performed more. Look, I mean, you can argue against it. You can say it's only in John's gospel that he talks about the miracle of Lazarus. So you could say it's only in one. So, but again, my point of view is that it really did occur. So I'm in agreement with you. I think this is a really good book, organizing all of the miracles in one binder, in one book. I find the author does tend to make some kind of ultimate moral statement based on miracles, which is kind of his own conjecture about what it means or why it occurred, which may or may not be so. But the actual miracles themselves, I certainly believe did occur, and it's a real value to have them listed in the book, because there's such a strong sense in our culture that this can't be literally true, but it did actually literally occur a little over 2,000 years ago. So I'm not sure what else to add. Oh, what I also liked about the book is that he would connect up archaeological references to say that there had been archaeological digs many, many centuries after the events occurred, which seemed to substantiate or at least infer that the events described in the New Testament did actually occur as they're written. So I thought that was really cool that he put that in the book. So I think it is a good book and is worthy of people's attention.
Richard, how can we agree on everything for once? I don't get it.
It's never happened before.
I don't get it. I was ready in part 2. Wait till you hear it. And we're in total agreement. I mean, I love it.
I'm in agreement. Yeah.
I mean, we've had other books. We've been in agreement on a lot of stuff.
We have not recommended the same book, but it's obvious we're both going to recommend this book.
Yeah. What I want to say in my recommendation portion is that, and I'm gonna share my screen.
Sure.
One more time, because I just want to show a few things, because this is this is really critical. Like, and you got to remember with me, where I went through that religion class with that professor that was just so pro Thomas Paine and against all this stuff that I had to go for years before I learned all this. I mean, I had to read the entire Bible through and figure it all out on myself, because my religion professor did everything he could to with propaganda and to try to influence me. But anyway, this is out of the NIV. This is actually one of my study Bibles, but you can see down here where I highlighted, then where Jesus was arrested, all the disciples deserted him and fled. And then this guy, I did a lot of research just trying to find on what happened to the apostles, and particularly Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, because they wrote this book and it was their eyewitness testimony. So I wanted to see what happened to them, because of course, when Jesus was arrested, they fled. But this guy, his name is Jerry Blunt, and he's an author. He's not real well known, but he has some books out. And I liked how he put it together. He put, after Christ's crucifixion, the disciples and other followers were disillusioned and discouraged. They were fearful, and many were in hiding. The person they thought was a Messiah was dead. Their hope in him as the Savior of the world was crushed. They began to disperse and return to their former way of life. But after the resurrection, and that's one thing that Kevin says in the very beginning of the book, he said what he left out of this book was the virgin birth of Jesus, his resurrection from the dead, and his ascension into heaven. But after the resurrection, they came together and began boldly proclaiming that Jesus was alive. There can only be one explanation for the change in the disciples, that Jesus was alive. The disciples had seen him and ate and drank with him, and he gives biblical references here. They knew with certainty that Jesus had risen from the dead. So again, there's also biblical verification of after he arose, and then they showed when they were with him. So they faced a lifetime of hardship and persecution and eventually died a martyr's death. Could they have sustained such unwavering faith if they knew that they were preaching was a lie? And he quotes from this guy, Paul Little. He goes, "Men will die for what they believe to be true, though it may actually be false. They do not, however, die for what they know to be a lie." So here's what happened to these authors of these Gospels. Matthew was killed by a sword. He was martyred. Mark was dragged by horses through the streets until he was dead. Luke was hanged preaching to the lost. And John, they boiled him in a basin of oil, but he wouldn't die. He came out miraculously unscathed. And so then they banished him to Patmos, and he wrote the book of Revelation. And the only thing I want to say kind of in closing is that this was order number 5. Jesus heals many sick and oppressed. It says, when the sun was setting, all those who had any sick with various diseases brought them to him, and he laid his hands on every one of them and healed them. Demons also came out of many, crying out and saying, "You are the Christ, the Son of God." Rebuking them, he didn't allow them to speak because they knew that he was the Christ. Can you imagine that? So he heals everybody. I mean, you read the book. They come and they touch his cloak. Everybody's healed.
That woman did, and she was healed.
A lot of people did. She did in that one instance, but he walked through towns and they would just touch his cloak. And they said, but it wasn't his cloak, it was him.
Well, they had faith. They had faith, and he rewarded their faith.
But with Jesus, he healed everybody with faith or not. It didn't matter. If they came to him, they were healed. So, and I just loved it. I think that I have one word to describe this book. And I would say some of the things in the book are maybe his view of what causes sickness and what, like sin causes sickness.
Yes, he does say that.
Yeah. Some things in there, I'm not saying no one knows for sure, but I mean, that's his opinion. But I would just say that as far as the miracles of Jesus, there's only one word to describe it. It's irrefutable. And I would highly recommend this book. I think everybody should get a copy of the book and just read it, because it's so cool to see them in chronological order, and how they describe like why he could turn the water into wine with those stone, the stone pots instead of clay, because they were
right. They were more sacred.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's just cool how he described it, and how he described, well, why did he cast the demons into the pigs? And he goes, well, maybe possibly because those pigs were being raised by Jewish people, like
Well, that weren't
illegally.
allowed to. It was a sin for Jews to raise pigs.
Richard,
yeah.
I'm afraid of the next book. I mean, you picked some pretty bizarre books, and I know
I knew you'd love them.
No, I know you got something up your sleeve. I know it.
I had the book.
Boy,
I thought I had it there. Okay,
I'm almost afraid to see what it is.
Okay, shut up, Frank. Okay, here we go. Here, let me find.
Here we go. I can't even, you try to guess how I'm going to attack the book. I try to figure out how bizarre the next book is going to be that you pick.
Okay, thank you for the vote of confidence, Frank. Okay, here we go. Here, I have the book written down. I have to open up the file to see. Here we go. There we go. Open up. Open Sesame. Okay, it's the title of the book. You'll love this. American Dirt.
Oh, whoa.
American Dirt by Janine Cummins. It's Janine is Jeanine. Cummins is Cummins.
I think I've heard of that book for some reason.
You might have. I think Oprah recommended the book.
Yeah, I think
So,
I have not read it. I have not read it, but I'm anxious to get after it. I'm gonna devour that book.
You're gonna research the author and come back to me with all these awful things you've found.
Well, you know what I do? I try to figure out some way that I can. I'm gonna admit it. I try to figure out some way to just set you up a little bit, and then the second half, because it's fun. It's like,
okay,
you would have done it to me today if you could. You just couldn't do it because you like the content. But
okay,
it's pretty funny. All right, Richard. Hey, listen, as always, fun. It's fun doing the critique, and I look forward to the next one.
Same here. It was good connecting with you today, Frank.
Right on. Take care, Richard. Okay. Bye.
Bye.